in the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste session series. And we just hinted to it in our last discussion, people and planet. We need to have a conversation about how food systems affect all of us, and no matter where you live, we're seeing it on the front lines. So I'm very excited to introduce you to our amazing moderator, Sweta, who's going to take over. And please stay.
Thank you. And I just want to say, wow, you got my name pronunciation right, and we just met. That's incredible. That never happens. So thank you for that. It is my pleasure to introduce the panelists for our next panel that's going to be looking at how we consider the balance of all of the trade-offs in decisions that we're making around food, agriculture, conservation, and then still ensuring that we're supplying people with food, with energy, right? So these are decisions that have some critical trade-offs, and we've got an incredible panel that's going to explore this with me today. I would like to introduce first Pearson, Global Initiative Lead for Food Circularity for the WWF, World Wildlife Fund. Welcome, Pete. Next, we have Matt Wilson, Food Sovereignty Director at Sicangu Community Development Corporation. Welcome, Matt. And finally, we have Lisa Zwack, Head of Sustainability at Kroger. So, thank you all. And thank you, audience, for being so engaged and being part of this conversation. We encourage you to use the We Don't Have Time app to talk about what we are going to be discussing here, to share this content with your networks, and to continue to take these ideas and run with them. This is a place where discourse starts, but it does not end. We are using the We Don't Have Time platform to ensure these conversations continue 24/7. And we bring these topics to viewers from around the world. We have 160 countries and thousands of people tuning in right now to listen to what's happening at Future of Food at South by Southwest. So thank you. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with Lisa. I'm going to start with Lisa, and I'm going to pose kind of a big question here, because, I mean, it's a big topic. So tell me how you see this intersection of this balance between making decisions that are good for the planet, but also do right by humans, and how does Kroger think about this? Talk to us a little bit about the kind of big picture.
Yeah, so can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, so my title or my role at Kroger is Head of Sustainability. So I work on our ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance team, leading our ESG strategy in partnership with Denise, who you heard from before, and many others. And so, one of the key, so we have an ESG strategy called Thriving Together, and that really helps articulate the way that we think about people and the planet and the systems that kind of support people and the planet. And then, as we've heard a bit about before, the centerpiece of our ESG strategy is really zero hunger, zero waste. Our vision for ending hunger and creating, zero waste in our business and in our communities. So those are some kind of like key things that we already have in place in the ways that we've articulated what we stand for as a company. But something that we also do kind of as part of this process in helping, validate our approach and thinking through what is the right emphasis for us is called a materiality assessment. And that's something that we conduct every couple of years as an opportunity to engage our stakeholders and really understand what matters to them, what are the things that Kroger can impact the most as a company, but also how are we impacted by outside forces. And so we use that process through a survey and, desktop research and interviews and so forth to really help first, articulate the things that are most important in our ESG report so that people are really understanding what we've been working on, but also kind of inform our strategy and where we should be, focused in the future. So that's one, mechanism that we use to kind of continue thinking about what's most important to us and what we stand for, because as a retailer, we have such a huge impact. We have facilities, we have a supply chain, we have our own manufacturing plants. I don't think a lot of people know that about us. We have a distribution center, so we really, and we sell thousands of products. So for us, it's really important that we be methodical and thoughtful about what we prioritize as a company.
Well, you're the United States' largest supermarket operator by revenue, so there's serious impact in the decisions that you make here. So it's
No pressure.
great, no pressure. And it's also great that you are using data. As a scientist, that's music to my ears. I need to ensure that decisions being made in any capacity that I'm responsible are entrenched in data, are entrenched in the numbers, right? Because that's the one thing that really doesn't lie. So it's great that you have that assessment in place. Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting into it more.
Okay.
Pete, so what is the relationship then between WWF and Kroger? How do you support this work?
So I started with, I'll make sure this is on. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I started with World Wildlife Fund in about 2015. I actually came from one of their competitors and was a sustainability director for a while.
Which one was that?
Albertsons and Super Value. Yeah. So when I started, we had begun a really great partnership around food waste reduction. And Kroger was very serious about wanting to reduce their food waste footprint, not only within their operations, but to start to look at it beyond their operation and within their supply chain. At the time, I mean, you could tell it was genuine. Like when we started this work with Kroger, I think it was around 2,700 grocery stores, 38 states. So when you think about that task by itself, 37 states, 2,700 stores, that is a huge task. Not every state is going to do this work the same way. There's no national mandate to reduce food waste. And so that's where the work began. It had even started before that with World Wildlife Fund in programs like sustainable seafood. So one of the things that World Wildlife Fund does is really take a deep dive into issues like sustainability and help businesses like Kroger understand the data and the science behind not only the direction they should take in terms of certain consumer-facing type of campaigns, but also looking really deep into the supply chain on what does it mean to have a sustainable seafood supply chain? How do you measure that? How do you quantify that in terms of progress every year? And so it's just been a really amazing partnership, and unfortunately there's always more and more work to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so WWF is so uniquely positioned between the private sector, additional not-for-profits, and so here you are supporting companies like Kroger, and you're also, by nature, all about conservation and seeing how to make decisions that really benefit not just individuals and companies, but of course the environment and animals. And so you've done some work on tribal lands as well and protecting the ecosystems there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, so our food and agriculture program is actually, I think it is the largest program that we have at World Wildlife Fund, which most people wouldn't naturally know. And the linkage there is when you farm land, guess what is typically sacrificed? Ecosystems and habitat. And so one of the largest programs we have in the United States is our Northern Great Plains program. We lose native grasslands in the U.S. at a pretty alarming rate. It's in some places on par with rainforest loss in Brazil. Most people probably don't know that. But in terms of a biome, in terms of an ecosystem, grasslands are critical. They are one of the most important ecosystems on this planet, and we cannot continue to just lose them. And so we have an entire field office in the Northern Great Plains. They focus on preserving and conserving iconic species like the buffalo, black-footed ferrets, but then also working with tribal communities on not only their food sovereignty, but programs like reintroducing buffalo into the cultural heritage and in the landscape. And to be honest, it's some of the most inspiring and wonderful work you ever see. Like every time that we get an update from that team in the Northern Great Plains, I get excited because there's times when it brings tears to your eyes. Like it's amazing to see some of the progress that the tribal communities are making.
Yeah, World Wildlife Fund is really well positioned for that. And some of the stuff that you're saying might not be widely known to maybe some of those tuning in is something that's really well known to you, Matt. You represent these lands, you represent indigenous knowledge, decades of it, centuries of it, millennia of it. And so your work is to transform systems that are intentionally designed right now to subjugate native people. And so instead, having these policies be more community-driven and grounded in indigenous values, specifically Lakota values. So would love to hear your perspective on how you balance these trade-offs.
Yeah. Haumadakapi, Matthew Wilson Machiapalo, Rosebud, South Dakota, Awati, Chante Washana, Pechuzapalo. So that's just a greeting I always give as part of a speech or anything I do like that. But yeah, for us on the Rosebud, we are really honing in on embracing our culture and really putting it a part of our practice and how we do our work. And some of the things that guide us is the concept of, Wichozani, which is holistic health. So not only thinking about health as, physical, but also mental, emotional, and spiritual health, which is also not very common for a lot of people to add in like a workplace environment. But we also embrace what we like to call wodakuye, so which is really embracing the interconnectedness of all the systems, and food especially, just the nature of it, is connected with health, with education, with housing and everything like that. And so we are doing food sovereignty work, and it is increasing local food access and getting people the knowledge and then the empowerment to grow their own food in a regenerative way. And for us, just traditionally, we weren't farmers in the traditional sense. We were more of hunter-gatherer people. And so that way of life really worked well with nature and in concert with nature. So we've never really seen ourselves above nature, or even the idea of like controlling nature. And so our goal is really to bring farming back into our community and make it become a tradition for ourselves. And the way we've been doing that too is also thinking generational thinking. So not knowing that everything we do today just affects in the next 10 years, but 7 generations into the future is something that is really important to us in how we do our work. We can't continue to keep pushing off the effects of like climate change and how we do things and just hoping that the next generation will have to deal with it.
That's so rational. No, I mean, that's of course the case, and yet look at how we are engaging with our environment, the only environment we've known, and we have no backup, we have no alternative, and yet we are consistently exploiting this planet, increasingly so, even with increased knowledge and awareness of what's happening. And I want to ask you all about that. Why is there such a disconnect between operations and conservation and protecting biodiversity? We're in a dual crisis. It's, well, actually a triple crisis. A communications crisis, that's making a plug for how we can really just do better in communicating. What we're doing here is part of that solution. We're in a climate crisis, of course, and we're in a biodiversity crisis. And yet, the population on this planet is growing, and people deserve access to food. People deserve access to healthy, nutritious food and energy. So how do we balance that? I mean, it's not fair to expect people to not live fulfilling lives and energy-rich lives. So how do we really think through these trade-offs? I'd love to hear from your vantage points. And maybe actually I'll turn back to you, if you don't mind, Matt.
Yeah, I think for us, whenever we think about doing any kind of like transformation work in our community, we always want it to be community-driven, and having the input and feedback from our community really drives our work. And that's kind of how we started, I think, with regenerative agriculture first. People wanted to have more local food access. There's actually a lot of food that is grown on Rosebud, but unfortunately it's done by non-native farmers that focus on monocropping, and that food gets shipped off somewhere else, I don't know where. And so our goal was really to have food that's grown here, and so our children, the next generation, know where their food is coming from. And the same thing with our Buffalo Project, which World Wildlife Fund is actually one of our biggest partners on that. Our community wanted a revitalized relationship with buffalo, and that has big effects and impacts, and not only just economically being to have buffalo as a means to for a food source, but also like we've seen the cultural impacts and having communities have more connection with buffalo, having our ceremonies that are buffalo centered, being able to do those again, but also seeing the effects it has on the land. We've been able to see a reduction in like invasive grass species and having more of the indigenous grass species come back, increase biodiversity. And so that is just like one small community-driven solution that the world can take it.
No, we love that. That's what it's about, right? Sharing good ideas, scaling solutions, finding additional applications for some of these things that we're seeing work at the community level, really partnering with the community, partnering with indigenous people of any community, anywhere around the world, taking that knowledge, taking advantage of all of that history. So thank you for sharing that. Love the work that you're doing. We're coming back to you, of course. But Pete, let me turn to you. And really, same question. How do we think about, being able to support the futures of increasing population on this planet while still really protecting this in one environment that we all share?
The economics. You fundamentally have to address the economics of food. For those that don't know, the Rockefeller Foundation did a report a couple years ago on the true cost of food, and I think that was a really amazing report because what it starts to show is this fundamental cost that we have to pay to provide food to people, and it's not just the fact that population's increasing. I mean, that's one big thing, right? It's 10 plus billion by 2100. It's that affluency is increasing as well. Like, people are rising out of the middle class, and one of the first things to change when that happens are people's diets. And so the problem with the system to date is that the economic system, the economic foundation of food, fundamentally does not incorporate externalities. It does not incorporate all the other things that food companies and producers probably should have to pay for, but that get externalized, like environmental degradation, like pollution. But here's the thing. I have not once met a farmer that is purposely poisoning the land. They are the most amazing stewards that we have at the ready for this movement. But the economics have to be built right for them to make the right moves. It's the same with grocery chains, right? You're in the business of profitability and you're a publicly traded company. You have incredibly tight margins, like you're not making money hand over fist. You've got to sell a lot of cans of beans to make a margin. But you have to get the economics of food right from the bottom up and all the way through the supply chain. And that's going to require some really hardcore reforms in some areas. Thinking about things like the Farm Bill. I mean, there's all kinds of places you can go with this, but fundamentally the economics have to be different on a finite planet where you have population and affluency growing.
I love that. Okay, economics. That was the top line answer, and then thank you for all of that context. And that really sets you up for your thoughts on this as well, please.
Yes. No, it's all very relevant commentary. So, and that is something that we definitely acknowledge too. I mean, when it comes to making food more sustainable, there can be additional costs to that. I mean, when we think about what we do to make our operations more sustainable, when we think about energy efficiency, that can be kind of a low-hanging fruit, right? Like, you can achieve energy reduction, you can achieve financial savings due to that. So that's a little bit easier to get across the line when we think about how we're investing in sustainability work. But then when you go to more sophisticated or more complex things, that requires more investment, and that's something that we have to think about carefully as a business. And we still want products to be affordable and accessible to our customers. We still want to be a profitable business. So it's a complicated topic that we're always thinking about as a group and as a company. But I do think with this kind of broader opportunity to, for example, engage with the supply chain on sustainability, there is more opportunity to share costs or to think innovatively or use kind of the collective wisdom to find solutions that can, still be affordable, for the participating groups. So, for example, we're right in the process of resetting our carbon emissions reduction goals. So we have committed to the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So we'll be setting a more ambitious Scope 1 and 2 goal. And most importantly, we will be setting a set of Scope 3, value chain emissions targets. So that's a great opportunity for us to think more creatively with the supply chain and our partners to really come up with solutions that kind of can benefit everybody and hopefully not, break the bank.
So these partnerships are really critical. I'm going to stay with you for a minute. These partnerships are really critical to be able to hit, the morality portion of the business, right? So you're operating, this is a company. And you obviously have to turn profit, and you have to make sure the shareholders for a publicly traded company are behind you and support you. We understand that. But at the same time, you are driven by these goals you've set for yourself that we're seeing now spread across industry, across society. So how are partnerships and collaborations with WWF, with community organizations, really ensuring that underlying additional ethos of conservation, biodiversity protection, how do those relationships ensure that business are running with morals at the forefront as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think like learning from partners, a key benefit of that is that they have probably also worked with other folks in the supply chain, like peers of ours or other brands, and so they can share that kind of knowledge with us. So, or even if we work with a consultant, they've helped others, and so they can say, here's like a great, creative financing mechanism that we've heard of. There's the Inflation Reduction Act, like that has opportunities for companies to reduce the investments that they make, or, so like there's ways that we can learn from one another. So it's not like every company is working in a silo and starting from scratch to develop our wisdom about how we want to do that. And I mean, just at Kroger in general, like our company is very aware of ESG and, Zero Hunger, Zero Waste. And our team, works closely with all the business owners and leadership to really continue this drumbeat and the, discussion of this so that we can continue to be more sophisticated about how we think about things and integrate the work that we're doing, into the business and keeping our peers around the company up to speed on what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you do a great job at this. It's part of the reason that you're here, you're contributing to the larger discourse. We need leaders across all sectors, and Kroger's doing an excellent job in the food system. So thank you for that. And how is this helpful for an organization like you, Matt? What are bigger companies doing to support your efforts, and how has that helped food production for you to grow that?
I think for us, I think funding like our big projects, like in with a lot of capital startup, especially with our Buffalo project, was, we couldn't have done that without the help of World Wildlife Fund, as being one of the bigger partners on that. But just knowing that all this work with policy and the work we see and the one to change in the world also has to start at the community level. It has to happen on the ground by people in the community doing the work too. So being able to invest in, salaries to be able to pay for people to have a livelihood in order to do that work is really important for us. And I think for us too, it's like a wildfire movement. You see one thing happening in one community and it really sparks another fire in another community and kind of helping to change the work on the community level anyways. And so that's how we've been able to see that happen on Rosebud with the work we're doing just in our community. And I would never have thought that, Rosebud would be a model for other communities across the road to look at and see what we're doing. So it's just really cool to share knowledge and best practices and also learn what other communities are doing as well. So it's all about collaboration.
And how is your knowledge moving up to bigger companies, and how are they adopting the takeaways that you're providing?
I would like to think that people are looking to us and asking for our input, especially with like regenerative agriculture now. It's like a big buzzword, and then people are kind of rushing to trying to define that. But I think that it's important to bring indigenous voices who may not always be heard or even get invited to the table. So I hope that more people and more companies are hearing our voices and amplifying them as well, and having them be part of the change work that we're trying to do.
Nice. Let's give it up for that. I hope you're clapping, all of you watching from around the world. We know that you're tuning in, and we hope you're clapping too. So let's continue this dynamic conversation. So Pete, talk about collaboration from your vantage point. So how has it been working with companies? What are some positive examples? What are some negative examples? What have you learned from these strategic partnerships? And what would you hope companies would take away and really benefit from collaborating with a global not-for-profit like WWF?
Yeah, I think one of the North Stars for us as an organization is to not just have the private sector engagement that we do just be one-on-one engagement. Like we love the partnership with Kroger, but I think one of the positive benefits is that they tend to always lead moving industries towards better pre-competitive engagement. Actually getting Kroger and Kroger's competitors working together. And I think when you have somebody like WWF in the middle of that, we tend to, I mean, the Kroger team knows, right? I'm always kind of pushing for that type of engagement and that pre-competitive engagement. That gets us to a point when everybody starts moving and building momentum, which is way, way more influential when you look at how we have to change. Now, the trick is also getting not just the top performing companies who tend to always sign up for this, but how do you get the bottom 20% that typically never do? Like, that's the mystery right now, is we need this movement towards regenerative, sustainable agriculture, zero waste, to be something everybody does. And so in the back of my brain, I'm always thinking, like, where is this rub between voluntary, corporate, industry efforts versus policy and government, and when does government have to get involved to a certain degree? On an issue like waste, for example, I think there are things that government and policy just simply has to do. You have to have the right policy in place so that it's fair, that it's equitable for all businesses, and that everybody has to move in the same direction. Otherwise, you're just constantly asking groups like Kroger to always make those sacrifices, and that's just not fair. I don't know if I have negative examples, but there's always partnerships that it really takes a lot to get them to keep moving. Business is tough, and I think COVID taught us that it can be really, really tough. And so, you gotta, I think having these partnerships allows a group like WWF to keep pushing, but also for businesses to realize where they might be lacking and not moving the needle as much. And that does happen. I mean, it does happen.
I was hoping to get some specific examples because the We Don't Have Time app, what we do is we give climate love. So anyone you want to shout out at any point will be getting climate love through our platform. It's a heart, a green heart, and climate warnings. So we're not shaming, but we're warning. And the idea is, and this is all entrenched in behavioral science, the idea is even if you're doing the wrong thing, so the word negative I didn't want to use actually, but even if it's not great right now, but your intention is to pivot towards what we know is going to be a clean energy future, then there is support for you from our global community. We know that companies that are right intentioned need that support. So
I'm going to press this a little bit then. Yeah. So there is one area on this planet where we know we need more engagement from companies, and it's in the area of landscape conversion. The conversion of natural habitat, be it forests or grasslands. There are companies that still have not, in our view, have not made concrete commitments to supporting those conversion-free landscapes. That is required. Like we are on this planet, and we realize now that we can't keep taking more and more away from nature. That's going to require the commitment of these companies, and some of the companies have been waffling, to be honest with you. It's a lot of companies that I think they know that they have deforestation and grassland conversion in their supply chain, but it's also, they're making profits. And so it's like this, it's a really tricky balance. And I think the only way you get there is through radical transparency, radical identification of data and measurement. And once you start measuring things to a really high level, you can't hide from that. I think you mentioned that right at the beginning. You can't hide from measurement. You can't hide from satellite imagery that shows the forest was there yesterday and it's gone tomorrow. That's the type of stuff that needs to be radically out and transparent in our world.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for putting that to the surface, because we actually are moving companies to do better, right? The whole point is we're giving warnings, but be right intentioned and you will get the support to make that transition. It's inevitable. We know we're going in that direction. If we do this right, we're ushering in a brighter, more breathable, more equitable future. I mean, it'll be better than anything we've ever created before. So we just need to share good ideas. We need to scale these solutions. And actually, it's going to be maybe tough a little bit in the short term, but ultimately winning for private sector, for public sector, for individuals, for animals, for the environment. That's what we're talking about here. So you get a warning until you join that trajectory to a better planet. So what is working? Let me come to you, Lisa. What are some of the methods that you described earlier that are actually working well to mitigate against the climate crisis? What can you share that maybe other companies in your sector can learn from, can pick up, can also apply themselves?
Yeah, So I think when it comes to like our climate work in particular, we have a very strong foundation in things like energy efficiency. Like for years, our company has been investing in LED retrofits and, putting closed doors on open cases and reducing refrigerant emissions. So I think it's like one thing that works is like building on and reminding folks of the work that, and internally too, like the work that we've done to date so that they feel confident and feel good about the work that we have done so that we can then build on that and feel confident in exploring new things. So can we adopt more renewable energy? Like we have energy in a handful of our facility, or renewable energy in a handful of our facilities, but can we look at more of that? So it's kind of leveraging the work we've done, the expertise, and to kind of build on that and think about new ways of working within, to adopt more climate-friendly opportunities.
Okay, fantastic. And same to you, Matt. What is working? What are you seeing? Are you positive based on some of these case studies that you provided that we actually will be able to have a future in agriculture that is truly regenerative?
I honestly believe that, yes. I'm very optimistic. I think looking at both macro and micro, on a micro level, there's so much happening just in my community around like being more aware of like how our food system plays a part of our everyday lives. Just, this past year, we've seen one of our local school districts, our student council has really created this like survey really asking our students, like, what do we want to see with our food lunch program? And so that was like a really cool thing that we just saw just at a youth level. And I think at the macro level, just with the U.S., we're just seeing so many opportunities come out looking to help transform these different systems. And sometimes it's overwhelming to understand, like, how do we fit this in with our work, or who do we need to start partnering with on different things? And so I'm very optimistic there. And I think I see a lot of good things coming for the world and for us.
Okay, I'm feeling that positivity. This is hopeful. So the point and purpose of this panel was really to figure out if we could balance the trade-offs that are required for large-scale food production and for, a planet that is restored, not just conserved, but truly restored. Does it look like that's going to be possible? I mean, it sounds positive. It seems like we're going in the right direction. That being said, not to be the Debbie Downer, I'm the last person to be the Debbie Downer for those of you who know me, but the reality is that carbon emissions are going up. Fossil fuel subsidies to oil and gas are going up, and the population of the planet is going up, and people deserve food. They deserve access to nutritious food, and that's a massive challenge that we're facing, and we're all leading in our respective ways, our projects, our initiatives, our companies. And so I'm going to start with you, Pete.
Small question, right? Just a small question.
It's the opening question. We're coming full circle. But can these two things coexist? Can we deliver food to the masses and still conserve this planet?
I'm an optimist. I think we can do it. Absolutely. It has to happen in three ways, though. These are three things that have to be concurrently occurring, and we have to be successful with them in order for this to happen. You have to get production systems right. You have to get farming and agriculture production systems that are using less in terms of resource, water, energy, fertilizer. They have to be increasing soil health and soil fertility global. And so that production system has to be moving towards a future that is more regenerative. What that requires is that radical measurement I talked about. You cannot make progress on something you don't measure. The second thing is you have to have the reduction of loss and waste, period. That has to be fundamentally included from farm all the way to fork in order for us to realize that future, because we can't put resources and energy towards food that goes into a landfill. Like, there's no way this happens without that. The third one is you have to change dietary preferences, and you have to be on a trajectory towards a change in diets. We know this. Now, what you are not going to see is this like one menu for everybody on the entire planet. Like, this is the diet that everybody has to conform to. That's just not reality. But you have to have a diet regionally, culturally based that is moving towards a lower level of resource use and consumption. There was a recent report just this last Monday that was published that said business as usual food production and consumption by 2100 adds 1 degree Celsius to our already problematic picture here. But if you do those 3 things, there's a chance we can continue to lower it, and we can cut that almost in half, actually more than in half. But those 3 things have to happen in concurrent.
And since you mentioned food waste and all the work you're doing with food waste, if we actually chipped away at the massive food waste issue, that would improve circumstances significantly as well. Could you speak on food waste?
I mean, I can speak on food waste for a long time.
Another panel altogether.
Yeah. Look, food waste is one of these amazing issues that in the last 5 years, I feel like I get a warm welcome from both Democratic and Republican parties.
Oh, what's that like?
I think it is the only single issue that exists where it's like you have Republicans and Democrats working together. So why not take advantage of that right now from a policy and a political perspective? I think it's really important. Like, some of these things should not be a choice. You should not have a choice to dump organic material in a hole in the ground where it creates methane emissions for the next 20 years. Like, that should not be a choice. That needs to be a public and a private sector investment. And let's get on with it. Let's get a win. Let's chalk one up for the climate and for the planet, and let's get a win under our belt to feel good about it. And so you can tell I get fired up because I'm just really impatient with this issue. I think we need to move. It's time.
No, that's great. Okay, so food waste might actually, if we could solve food waste, we might also solve the bipartisan divide. I love it.
It's going to be the one issue that does it, yeah.
Win-win. So same question to you. How do we think about conserving the planet and still being able to supply the population with nutritious, healthy food?
Well, something I was thinking about is that has come more to light as we're working on our new climate commitment to involve the supply chain, is just how much synergy there is between these different sustainability topics. So, I mean, we're kind of in the early days of our work there, but even now we're okay, so Kroger has some plant-based products in our assortment. Maybe we can leverage that more. We already have sustainable packaging commitments. What can we do there to kind of not double count, but you know what I mean? Give yourself the credit and do more to use the things that we're already doing, a lot of other people are doing, and we're very focused on food waste. So how can we amplify that into the supply chain with our suppliers to get them to reduce food waste? I feel like there's these synergies that are happening, and I think that is reflective too of this more of the nature focused approach, with the science-based targets for nature and the TNFD disclosures. There's more happening in this kind of holistic systems thinking that I think will kind of help us move forward too. But there's a big work ahead, no doubt. But I think there's ways that we can do it.
Yes, I love that. Really thinking about the whole thing, right? And in health, that's happening. This one health approach, you're looking at human health, animal health, environmental health. So the health sector is getting it. The food sector is getting it. So this is all positive. We're seeing trends in the right direction. And I don't know anyone who could speak better to that holistic approach than somebody who comes from a community, an indigenous community, and is working in that community. So what do you think? Are we going to be able to restore these lands? Are we going to be able to feed future generations?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think a lot of that, too, is making sure that we really invest and prioritize our youth, which are going to be the next generation of leaders. And so that is what we do as well at Rosebud. We really invest in our youth and knowing that, they need to be, what's the word I'm looking for, I guess, supported and cultivated to become the leaders of today. But also making sure that they don't grow up not knowing the same things I grew up with, not knowing my culture. And so we make sure that culture is a part of our work and part of our internship programs that we do with them. So that they can really use our indigenous identity to really drive some of these solutions, and they might be the ones to come up with these solutions that we might not even thought of yet. And so it's really important to really invest in them as well.
Indigenous knowledge really respects the past, it respects the ancestors and future generations, and that's something humans miss. And this is from a behavioral science point of view. We say we want to do things to protect our children, and we mean it when we say it. but our actions don't align with the words. And that's because our brains aren't actually wired to think that far into the future. We can't think beyond mostly our daily decision making, but thinking decades into the future, we're just not wired. So even though we get frustrated with these promises that are being made for future generations, I would like to leave the audience with one thought, is just remember cognitively that this is something intrinsic, aside from maybe indigenous knowledge, which I think is uniquely well positioned to understanding the future. But generally, humans are not wired to be able to comprehend risks of those in the future, those who don't exist yet. And so we need to treat each other with compassion, because even though people are seeming misaligned between what they're saying and what they're doing, people are well-intentioned. Let's continue to collaborate. Let's continue to work together, and let's break down that bipartisan divide and really, truly be compassionate to each other, because that's one thing we have in common. We are cognitively suffering from the wiring of our ancestors. We haven't evolved quickly enough, actually, with the new world that we're living in, a planet that's rapidly warming. So if we keep that in mind and we continue to be compassionate and work together, I also now am convinced, thanks to these expert panelists on this topic, that we will be able to overcome the climate crisis. We will usher in a future that is restored and has equitable access to nutritious food. So thank you so much to each of you for your contributions today. Thank you.
We just want to take 1 second to thank you for being a part of the Zero Hunger, Zero Waste sessions. It has been an amazing conversation today, from how food is medicine to nutrition and security. We just really got into how this is all affecting our planet, our communities around the world, and the panel I had earlier on collaborations being key. That has been a theme we've heard throughout the day. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and please come say hi. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I can taste your